Thank you all for your time today. We're going to jump right into it. And what I hope that we're going to have today is a conversation, not, and we have a presentation, but really we want this to become a dialogue. And for those who don't know me, my name is Chris Rivers. I work at Social Impact Partners for my day job, and I get the absolute honor and privilege of leading our higher education work. The issue we're talking about today, though, is not that. We're really talking about AI impact on the Connecticut workforce. And the reason why I got pulled into this is because we have a couple amazing social impact partners who I'll introduce here in a minute, but several of us have different backgrounds in AI. My job right before I came to Social Impact Partners to do the work that I love doing right now was I was a consultant at Infosys doing AI strategy consulting work, helping business leaders from small, medium, pretty large scale businesses try to figure out how to really leverage AI in their day-to-day operations and then also translate that to the much more technically minded developers who can turn the business problems into technical solutions and go back and forth. So that's what I was doing for quite a bit of time before coming to Social Impact Partners. And so part of me always loves being a data nerd and an AI both skeptic and enthusiast all at the same time. It's a mixed bag. And what I worry about oftentimes is the way that AI is talked about, whether you're reading news, reading the big consulting firms, which I used to work at, press releases, thought leadership, you tend to make these big, grand, scary proclamations about what AI is going to do to the workforce. And that's fundamentally what we wanted to try to tackle. Hey, is there a way to get beyond the big scary headline into a methodology that can create actionable insights that then state leaders, that then people who are in the higher education system, employers, the whole gamut of decision makers in this space could make better, more informed decisions based on. And that is totally in line with what we at Social Impact Partners do day in and day out, where we're trying to really tackle the equity divide in our state that has so many resources and so many capabilities, but it's also one of the most unequal states in the country. And so we're going to be putting all this work in day after day after day to allow people to have the skills they need to earn living wage jobs, the opportunities they need in order to get into jobs that they can find meaning in. Figure it would probably be worth some of our time and energy of our partners looking into how are those jobs going to be impacted by AI? We don't want to be preparing people and setting people up to be entering jobs that are not going to be around in another year or so, just to repeat this all at, in a year or two. So that's largely how I see this effort fitting into our larger social impact partner mission. And we are very fortunate for those who've been around social impact partners for a long time, know that we have an absolutely amazing cadre of partners, volunteers who dedicate their time, energy, expertise, and oftentimes money for those who want to donate to these sorts of problems. So before we jump into the presentation, I just saw that Mark jumped on. Mark, anything from a social impact partner higher level, how this all fits in that I missed that you want to chime in on? If not, we can keep going. That's the classic I'm looking for the mute button expression. Okay.
Yes, that's right, Chris. No, I thought your intro was great, and this is incredibly important, not only in terms of workforce but our education system as we work, with both the K to 12 and higher ed system. So, uh, really excited about the work that this team has done.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. With that, Brett, let's go to the next slide. So I really just teased this just a minute ago. The purpose of this study and this effort, which we are not totally done with the study, we'll give you more details as we go, but we really wanted to play around with different methodologies to get to what we would call actionable insights. And I think the where we've gotten to is a place where we can say, yes, there is a methodology that will get you to actionable insights. And then there's clear next steps coming out of this. And that's what we're about to walk through with this presentation. And we really think this methodology will lead to insights to better inform decision makers at all levels, all across our state. So that's why we're really excited about it. And Brett, let's go to the next slide. here's the four folks who really dedicated a lot of time to this, and honestly, more Sanjeev and Brett, who you're going to hear about or from for the rest of this presentation, are both recovering entrepreneurs, recovering consultants, recovering thought leaders in this space, and not just recovering, but still doing this work. And so we are very fortunate to have them in part of the SIP umbrella. And Joe, who most people on this call already know, is such an impactful thought leader in this space. He was here at all the steps along the way, and I know he's doing some work to get settled in on a new place. So he's a part of this team, but you're really going to get walked through and you have the right experts on the call to ask questions of, to really dive deep into conversation, not just because of the work that Sanjeev and Brett have done in their career, professional careers, but the work that they continue to do day in and day out. And honestly, this is one of those awesome intersections between expertise and a passion project. So just fair warning, when you ask a question, you might get us all going. So we might explore some rabbit holes, and that's totally okay. So let's jump to the next slide. And I just want to, for my part, close on this. Here in Connecticut, we have the fortune and perhaps misfortune in this AI revolution to have what we would call a very cognitive heavy economy. So across the country, about 50% of jobs, give or take, are what we would consider cognitive roles, roles in the workforce where you're using your brain more than you're using your brawn. And Connecticut, we skew much higher than the national average in that arena. That fundamentally exposes us to how AI is going to change the nature of work because AI is really going to change an awful lot about how those cognitive roles are done here in the short term and long term. It's also the first time in a long time that senior knowledge roles, think consulting partners, think the senior leaders, are going to be seeing these impacts firsthand on trying to make better decisions, leveraging these tools. We're not talking about the old transformation of automation that came with robotics overhauling manufacturing, which a lot of our towns had to deal with along the way. But we're also dealing with this all up and down the entire organizational structures, which is making this different than transformations we've seen in the past. And finally, I just want to close out from my section before handing off to Sanjeev on it's changing incredibly fast. When we saw adoptions of the internet in the 90s, when we saw automation overhaul manufacturing, there was a lot more what the military would call flash to bang time. You can really figure out where the cutting edge is and adapt to it. And that felt fast at the time for those who lived through it. For this, the cutting edge of AI and like how people are using it in their work changes week by week, not just year by year, month to month. So we're constantly trying to stay on top of it. We're constantly at Social Impact Partners trying to leverage AI in a way that makes sense for us. And so we're all using it at different levels, but it is fundamentally changing the nature of work week in and week out. So what might be true 6 months ago or a year ago, and I'll honestly just admit, when I first started this project, I thought I was at the cutting edge of AI, and then I said something, and Sanjeev was like, "No, because we have RAG AI," and I was like, "All right, fair enough." So I wasn't at the cutting edge because I was out of the work for quite literally 3 months. And that's just the nature of what we have to deal with at pace of change wise, and that's why having a tool that can get us to actionable insights is so important. And more importantly, having a tool that can get us to actionable insights and then allows us to reuse it over and over and over again. So as those insights shift, the tool can shift, decisions can shift. So that's why we're super excited about this. And with that, I think this is the right moment for Sanjeev to step in here and really talk about fundamentally what is AI, what isn't it, what is this report on the next slide.
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to meet all of you as a SIP partner. I look forward to having more occasion to interact with you. But thank you for all joining today. We much appreciate your interest in this critical topic, as Chris you've explained. And I don't think it's just for Connecticut; it's for the nation and society as a whole. This is, I think when we first started this effort, we were trying to raise the alarm in some ways because of the experience that Brett and I had and Chris had saying, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It may be a train, and I think we've come a long way. And I think everyone knows what the light in the end of the tunnel is. So, I think we're seeking to create more clarity today. I'll reinforce what Chris said. We're looking to stimulate a dialogue, and we really hope that we take it out of this room and continue it on. Before I walk you through our perspective on AI and then onto the analysis we did, I thought worth providing some personal context. I've spent over 3 decades of professional life on, I would say, 3 topics: technology innovation, operational transformation, and organizational behavior change. I've been through several cycles of innovation, as I'm sure many of you have, that have fundamentally changed the way we work and live. And it started way back in distributed computing, the World Wide Web, mobile, and now AI. I say all that to let you know that over the years, I've picked up plenty of scar tissue that informs healthy skepticism and, frankly, a distaste for hyperbole. So hopefully, what you find today is a tone of realism. And as such, I hope that you know that everything we're saying today is backed with experience, expertise, and some seasoned reasoning. So, at a at an even more personal level, AI and its impact on workforce is a topic I care about very personally because of my son. My son is graduating with now his soon, we hope, with his master's in AI. He did his undergrad in data science, and we were able to viscerally experience, my wife and I, the challenges that he found in looking for his entry level opportunities coming out of engineering school with the kind of degrees he was looking at. Should have, a few years ago been, he should have been welcomed with open arms. It's not the case today. So there's something afoot, and the effort to figure out what is it and how is that playing out is very much what drove me to be part of this team, and very grateful for the team effort here. So, moving on to what is applied AI and why is it important to discern applied AI from AI? I don't have to tell you about AI, that AI is out there and it's in everything we do. It's sort of like the air we breathe. I think it's in the news cycle every day. It's in the, in the market cycle, but it's really important to discern that there's something there's been an evolution. Myself, many moons ago, had an undergrad focus on AI, and so AI has been around that long. I've had hands-on experience with AI and what it can do to the journey I've had in banking, both internally and through consulting. And so machine learning, deep learning, all of those things have been around for some time and they've had enormous impact and continue to. But what happened is, in a word, Chat GPT, and this arrival of the foundational models that today give birth to the large language models, the variety of them that are out there, and the democratization of those. And what that created was a capex cycle, which is still ongoing. I mean, it's startling just how much money is being invested in this. But the market was being driven by the momentum of the core technologies, if you will. That is shifting, and it has been shifting, I think, especially as of this year, because that all that capex is seeking OpEx returns, and so having this AI used and AI used in anger with, especially within the enterprise, is a big focal point. And so the emphasis is shifting to applied AI. So that's one reason why we want to focus on applied AI, because we think that's the wave of the future and the one that persists for many years to come. Not saying that core tech wave is done, but this sort of echo of applied AI is very important. The second is, initially, AI was very much about its impact on developers. So those of you who've been following it, it created massive productivity in software development to the point where there's been large layoffs from the tech in the tech industry as a result. The outsourcing industry in India has been massively impacted. Programming is now commoditized and questionable. Is it a promising field of study? But something else is happening with applied AI. When AI is used in as broadly as it can be in the enterprise, it is impacting literally every cognitive role out there. And you'll see, data speaks thousand words, if you will, and we're gonna walk you through our findings. And that it's that particular dynamic that we wanted to dig at because we believe that because we're Connecticut, we're not immune to the tech industry problems. We are very much actually at the beginning of our second wave that is going to have large impact in workforce, literally in all our cognitive workforce. So what does that look like? How does that work? How large is the impact? When is the impact going to happen, et cetera, is the study. But it was important for us to give you that view of this study. When you see the numbers are sobering. That may be an understatement, but they're also conservative. We're not talking here about the numbers associated with the reduction in force that's already happening from the reduction, the tech workforce impacts. We're talking very much about the forward-looking projected view of what impacts are coming up in the business sector, if you will. And when you think about that, we've also narrowed the aperture a little bit or the lens a little bit more to be conservative, which is we went after really understanding where the two largest impact areas of AI are really what is the workforce impact they're propelling. There are many impacts of AI, but from our experience, certainly Brett, mine, and in Chris's, exception processing and unstructured data processing are going to have some of the largest impacts, in the cognitive workforce, especially at the enterprise level. And it is going to change literally all the workflows that we have in any enterprise today in our state and beyond. It is going to impact routine and non-routine. Chris referenced this, and to peel that back even a little bit further, routine cognitive has been, there's been a rolling impact from deep learning and machine learning and so on for some time now. But this notion of non-routine, routine business roles is coming into the foreground. And the combined effect is what we're looking to extrapolate. Demand reduction for current cognitive roles due to AI, that's our focus. When you hear us talking about the impact, I do see the question, by the way, I'm going to get to it in a second. Demand reduction for cognitive roles is what we're looking at. We know that just because there's workforce impact, whether that results in layoffs or whether that results in repotting of people or other types of impacts is idiosyncratic. It depends on the organization and their choices they're making. It depends on the macro cycle, whether there's growth, which we're fortunate enough that there is right now, and I think that's holding things up. So, we want you to have that in mind moving forward. There's a request to explain exception processing and unstructured data processing. I'm going to dive into that. So thank you. Please do jump in. So a vast majority of, enterprise is really, you could view the world as front office, middle office, back office. And when you look at the front office, there's an awful lot of AI playing out there. A lot of it is in things like propensity modeling. It's driving every promotion that's out there. It's about understanding the customer and customer analytics. That's not really driving a lot of workforce impact in that it's not resulting in a reduction in demand. It's providing growth opportunities and that's really what's driving that interest. The efficiency is coming from a different place. The efficiency is coming, and there's multiple ways that AI is being applied in enterprises, certainly in risk and control is one angle. But if you look at where straight up efforts to do efficiency and efficiency increasingly through an aggregation of productivity, that is happening in two places. Wherever in operations is the heavily impacted zone, or finance, or certainly the risk org as well. Wherever you're doing processing in a deterministic way. You've got rules that say, take all this data, make a decision. If the decision gives you a certain answer, move it in one direction, otherwise move it in another. inevitably those rules are not complete and you encounter exceptions. And so there's exception processing. Given the level of digitization in the world today, a vast majority of the workforce in operations, as an example, is where those exceptions occur. And they're doing the exception processing. So Brett will talk more about this, but one of the workflows we looked at was the claims workflow in for healthcare. And that is where a lot of people in Connecticut are employed, and it's an area that's already seeing impact, and we'll look at that. So that's an example of exception processing where claims were not approved and they needed to go through a higher level of review. And so that is an exception process. Unstructured data processing is really interesting because it is literally everywhere where processes and processing is halts because humans are needed to read through unstructured data, meaning PDF files, regulations, contracts, emails, and so on. In general, those that unstructured data has been hard to parse to turn into structured data that we know how to process and to digitize and do traditional data database work and so on. AI is extremely good at tackling that, especially the large language models are extremely good. And so wherever you've got unstructured data processing, increasingly you're finding that AI is being put in there to drive at least productivity, if not automation. A good example, as Chris referenced earlier, consultants. The entry level of consultants is decimated right now because a lot of that junior work of collecting lots and lots of data, reading through it, summarizing, presenting it to the consulting team and the partner, that's all now being done in through AI. Similarly, if you look at investment banking, the investment banking ranks, the entry level, investment banking is growing, but nowhere near the employment growth that is nowhere near what it should be if it was a one-to-one. It's because a lot of the junior level work and preparing a book, a pitch, is now being done by AI because that is a lot of unstructured work combined with some structured work. So hopefully that helped explain why exception processing and unstructured data processing, they're both vast areas that you can approach in multiple ways, and very often they combine. So you'll see a lot of exception processes that wind up with a lot of unstructured data. The classic case is claims processing, where you have to look at the language, the contractual language of the particular insurance policy and so on, and the actual medical notes and so on. So that combination is even more powerful in driving productivity. Before I jump up, Brett or Chris, did you want to add anything to that?
No, no, I think that was a good setup. I think that notion of, why we focused on we're applying on applied AI, as Sanjeev took us through, is important. We're not, because so much we do have this lens of thinking about Connecticut. And as we look at this data, I think so much of that foundational work is likely to be geographically concentrated in a few places like Silicon Valley. Um, but as Sanjeev said, what we're going to, with sort of these first initial phases of the development on the foundational side, it's now, we think, the most uh, exciting and dynamic aspects of AI are going to be the application of it. And that's going to impact everything, not just the people whose job is I build AI. It's going to be every job that you do is going to start having impact. And that's what we think we need to prepare for.
Thank you, Brett. Um, Feel free to press on if that didn't answer your question, but to move it along a little bit, before why don't we move to the next page? Happy to revisit this if people want. One of the premises of the study all along has been it's not enough to try to do the traditional research model to project the impact of, or to understand the impact of AI because there's not a lot of history and it's moving extraordinarily fast. And so when we started this effort in, earlier side of last year, I think it was May timeframe, right, when we got mobilized. you really didn't have a lot to go on in terms of classic secondary research and even primary research. It was very difficult to assess exactly what was going on. There's a lot of speculation. Since then, a lot of things have happened. There have been a couple of really good studies done by MIT and by OpenAI itself, and using a variety of data sources, ADP data as an example, or even the user data for OpenAI. But that's retrospective, and one could question easily the longitudinal view on that. Is that going to give you a good projection? So we took it upon ourselves to create an you can call it an algorithm to project based on we know how AI impacts, where it can impact, and the likelihood of impact. And I think that's so that the ability to project was very important to us. So we want you to bear that in mind. The second thing we want you to bear in mind is everything was cross-referenced to foundational field observations. We rejected things that felt like they were, you know, too far extrapolated or didn't really fit what we were experiencing on the ground. We had the luxury of, being involved in this space even as we were writing the study. Some of the foundational observations we thought were worth sharing. As an example, AI is already changing the workforce. I've been involved in that. For example, a global investment bank that was using machine learning had virtually eliminated cash equity trading rules as early as not quite by 2010, but since 2010 to 2020, cash equity trading, a lot of trading overall is hardly a human activity these days. It's very much program trading. So that's an example of AI. That itself is not stopping, it's expanding because compute power has grown so much recently that you're able to do that even with greater ferocity. If you look at Big Four consultancies, as I mentioned, they've reduced entry-level hiring as of 23, and they're open about it now. There's newspaper articles being written about it. For a while, that they weren't quite as they weren't sure where they were going, so weren't quite as sanguine. The the other field observation that's important is that most of AI's or applied AI impact is going to be through operational workflows. This notion of workflow is really important. I've found in my work that if you try to just apply AI and which is happening, and you hand it out like candy and you give it to everybody in different roles and jobs and say have at it, you get some benefit. It winds up being mostly personal productivity benefit or small benefits that are largely dealing with externalities or the ends of processes. The heart of the opportunity is actually in the 80% of opportunity, as one custody bank concluded, is actually in the deep workflow that is the middle and back office. And that's just beginning. So, and why is that? Because you have to really get at the work that's being done, tear that apart and say, how could that work change using AI, not necessarily eliminating the human. In fact, in highly regulated enterprises, you want to avoid that, right? So, um, it's so the notion of workflow you're going to
Oops.
hear again and again. Sorry, can you
Yep, sorry about that. My mistake.
quickly go back? The other is enterprise growth is increasingly decoupled from headcount growth. It's a phenomenon that I think everyone knows now, but we were observing it way early. So there's things afoot that we were aware of, like a large bank had basically said you can't invest in humans unless you first figure out that you can't use AI agents. Uh, Freezing and back for all backfilling of jobs is in place at another bank. And the technology departments have already taken a hit of up 20% plus at some of the larger banks. So these are some of the observations we use to cross-reference. Keep going, Brett. So So before I turn it over to Brett to tell you about the study and the really great work I think he's been able to do to make this scalable, here are the top takeaways. So number one, at least we think there's at least 30% reduction in demand for the 1.1 million cognitive workers in Connecticut, and that impact is rolling as of right now. Um, and there's a compounding wave of AI impact. There's the predictive impact, which is really the older technologies, the machine learning, the deep learning, and there's what we would call the generative impact from the large language models and the agentic AI that is rolling forward. It is impacting, work at all levels, as we said, but it's interesting to tear that apart a bit. And we believe that in our projection is that we could see as many as a reduction in demand of as many as 145,000 roles in the next 1 to 3 years across all the workflows at all the enterprises in Connecticut. If you look 8 to 10 years, and you could question whether does not the world not change much in 8 to 10 years? Yes, but if you just did an extrapolation, that's about 550. And by the way, this comports with some of the analysis, as I said, that was done by other, groups. Um, these the color here is that the junior roles face up to 85% demand reduction. So the entry level and the employee zones 1 to 3 are really the most vulnerable. But the senior roles are also being impacted. On the medical side, you're already seeing that fast forward. Pathology, as an example, is massively impacted by AI, causing a large reduction in the number of doctors involved in reviewing pathology studies. Lastly, and as I said, what are people going to do with all this demand reduction? Well, the large enterprises we think are going to seek the bottom line. They're going to want earnings growth. They're going to shut off employment, and if the growth stops, that could easily turn into a reduction in force. Some of that's happening already. On the other hand, the small and medium-sized businesses potentially could grow because they don't have the capacity today that understands AI. And so as they get interested and step into this field, that may be a counteracting force, and we want to explore that. So net, we think the demand for native AI talent is going to grow. See, in all this displacement, there's the other side of it, which is AI is going to get embraced. People who know AI are going to be in demand, and new roles will be created. We think small and medium-sized businesses may be very much in the lead for the new roles there. And so for every state out there, and certainly Connecticut, how do we position as an AI first state to take advantage of that growth? Because enterprises, businesses are going to look for locations where they can source talent and retain talent that is AI native. That's going to be a lot of competition for that. We are very aware through our research that many states have taken an AI first step. There's a White House mandate that supports that as well. But hopefully that top takeaways is of interest, has got your attention. It's now time, Brett, to talk about how we did that.
Yeah. Great. Any questions on sort of the first aspect of our presentation here before I start drilling a little deeper? No? Okay. We'll go ahead and I guess I'll sort of just introduce myself officially too. So Brett Adams, and I've been unlike Sanjeev, I can't claim to have been working on AI since my undergraduate career, but have been in product management roles, principally in fintech, for the last 20 years or so, and started working closely with Sanjeev. I don't know, I was realizing, Sanjeev, this is probably our third year of actually officially working together, even though we've probably been talking about this stuff for even longer than that. But it really is the application of AI and seeing all the things I think as a product manager I used to think about as theoretically, gosh, you ought to be able to someday do this, uh, seemingly moving from the bounds of theory to actual practice and application, and thinking about the impact is a lot of what drew me to work on this project. Um, but I'll take some time to kind of walk through, and we can go faster or slower, depending how interested you are in sort of the nuts and bolts of how we undertook this study, as Sanjeev said, that we started back in May timeframe. Um, but I think it all began really with the notion and the concept of a rubric. And our rubric, as has been alluded to here, is, we wanted something that was reusable, that was also going to help us project. I think, as Chris said, things are just moving so quickly. It's important still to look at the analyses that are coming out that are taking retrospectives or are based on historical data. But the rate of changes we've seen is that's happening here makes that even a report that comes out that's based on data from the second half or the middle of 2025 is already behind the curve. And so it's important, even if it's imperfect, we thought, to continue to be looking forward and looking ahead and trying to we do have some knowledge. We can make we ought to be able to make some viable projections so that we can actually try to stay at least attempt to try to get ahead of the curve. And also, we wanted to make sure that we came up with a rubric that was going to be actionable, that the results that we came out would be actually um, be able to help pinpoint and target areas that could be taken on, and that initiatives or activities could be taken on to try to drive some improvement and help ultimately prepare the workforce of the state of Connecticut for what's coming. So with them kind of putting together that rubric, the key questions that we looked at. Firstly, kind of where in Connecticut's workforce is AI most likely to have a significant impact? And here we really leveraged on this team that we have, there's of just, the knowledge that we had coming in and doing a bit of secondary resource, but what we know about the state of Connecticut, and to think through, gosh, and from this, we said we're going to really try to focus on cognitive work, given that we're focused on the state of Connecticut as an example. But in thinking through some of the bigger industries that are unique or preponderant in the state of Connecticut, such as healthcare and financial services and others. Secondly, which occupations and skill levels will be most affected? So getting to this actually actionable stuff, what actual roles are going to be impacted, and is it going to be and within those roles, is it going to be the junior folks that have just starting their careers, or the folks who've been in those careers for a longer period of time? Because you're going to have different type of actions if you're thinking about having to try to transition folks who've been in roles who are long in the tooth, versus thinking about how are we preparing folks for what jobs might be coming. Um, when are the changes likely to occur? We wanted to take a stab at this. Nobody has a crystal ball, but we thought it was important to at least put some markers down and try to at least start thinking about that and putting some discipline and some thoughts around how we can try to project when these changes are going to occur. So again, getting to actionable, thinking about when we would need to be able to be prepared for some of the changes that we see coming. Um, we talked a bit about the different types of AI Sanjeev was talking about earlier, that we've sort of translated into these waves. The first wave being more of the predictive exception processing piece, and increasingly the more generative unstructured data processing, as forming sort of a second wave, and frankly, the combination of the two being that much more powerful. But we wanted to build out our analysis that could actually identify and say, look, this is the type of AI that could get applied to this workflow. And then last but not least, we wanted to quantify it, and to be able to say, well, what does this mean? If this type of job in the state of Connecticut is going to be impacted, what does that mean? given the number of people who currently work in these types of roles today, and which ones are going to be transformed. And we did a little bit of thinking too. It wasn't the focus, but we started going there in terms of what jobs might also be created. So that was kind of that. This was this notion of the rubric that we came up with, and honestly, we could have stopped the project there. We felt that the rubric that we came up with was there was some value in just having this in place and saying, look, here's how you want to think about it and tackle these questions and this problem. But we wanted to we then took on ourselves to try to see, well, okay, if we're putting this forward, can we build a prototype to go test this and take it for a ride and see if we could actually put this rubric into practice and test it on a workflow or two to see, does it work, and how might we make it work, and how might we set it up for a phase two of the project, which you'll hear us talk about here in a moment, about that we would still like to undertake to really try to scale up this approach. A couple quick notes just kind of on the key frameworks and data that we used. As much and wherever possible, we tried to ground the work in existing hard data. So whether that was looking at definitions of jobs and roles that already exist with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, ONET provides a great record and a huge battery of work in terms of describing the nature of work within the existing um, job categories and definitions in the Connecticut Department of Labor too, to get some numbers and things. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel where we didn't need to. In fact, we really wanted to avoid reinventing the wheel because we wanted our work to be able to tie back into other and map into other analyses that have or may ultimately be built. So it's kind of it's grounded in that sense. Sanjeev talked a bit about we really leaned heavily into the sort of task-based framework, this two by two of routine, non-routine work, and manual and cognitive work. Um, we focused on we early on decided to focus on the cognitive roles, which it's not to say that AI is not going to be impacting and continue to impact the manual side of the equation here. It's just where we chose in terms of our efforts and frankly some of the most of our experience is not in manufacturing, just the team that we had, but that's where we chose to focus. Um, and that was a really important aspect in terms of how we set up the modeling that we did. Um, but looking between both routine and non-routine types of work that is going to be impacted. And as Sanjeev noted, it's really fascinating that this time around, this technology wave is really impacting that upper right quadrant in ways that really previous heretofore technological or technology revolutions haven't really quite impacted. But so that's a really novel aspect of what we're seeing today. Um, and then, last but not least, we spent a fair amount of time on talking about PEP and UDP. So I don't know if I won't belabor the point, but um, we built that into our modeling to be able to identify and say, well, this type of role or this type of work step is probably going to be most impacted by one or the other, or a combination of the two. Was built into the work that we did. So, any questions on frameworks and data? No? Okay. Um, won't spend a lot of time on this, but just to kind of show you this, there was some method to our madness and how we approached all this and how we built it. It really started with that subject matter expert group that we had amongst the four of us. We used that to identify, what a workflow description would look like. We built two applications. One we called the mapper application, which was building out the basic demographics of a specific workflow. How many people were, what types of role, or firstly taking that workflow and dividing it into, a dozen or so sub steps, and then identifying which types of roles per Department of Labor Statistics and ONET actually perform those types of activities, how much of their time. So you may have a doctor who works, even the first, as we'll go through here, the first workflow we looked at was healthcare claims exception processing. Physicians play some role in that, but it's a tiny fraction of their time, right? They're spending most of the time treating patients, but they do have to spend some amount of time, whereas a insurance claims processing clerk might spend 70% of their time on this. So it was building that out and saying, well, this step, here's how many people work in this space, but they're spending this fraction of their time on this work steps to give us that balance and understanding of who is working um, on this particular um, workflow. And then the second application we built was to go in and it really did that AI impact assessment and to try to drive in using inference modeling to say these are the types of AI, PEP, or UDP that are principally at play. How quickly is the this impact likely to hit this work step? We spent a fair amount of time building in dampeners if it was a heavily regulated type of work that might slow things down, availability of data, those types of things. But that enabled us to go out and take a stab at making a projection at um, who, when, and how much the impact was going to be. All right. So I'll jump to some samples of the type of output that we built. And so this was our we leaned really heavily, and this was our practice workflow, which was healthcare claims exception processing. And we chose that knowing how uh, prominent healthcare insurance is as an industry here and as a sector in the state of Connecticut. Um, and as you can see here, what we've done is left to right. We chose just increments of 1 to 3 years, 4 to 7 years, and then 8 to 10 years to try to put down a baseline or a marker in terms of different time segments, and then looking at junior versus more senior roles. And again, the role descriptions are ones that we're borrowing from established definitions. We weren't creating these ourselves. And so, as you can see, and not surprisingly, what we saw, and I'll show you on the next slide a couple other examples. So it varies by degree, but the general principles held that you tend to see um, junior roles more heavily impacted in the earlier phases, in phase one, in the 1 to 3 year period. Um, but the senior roles are not immune, and they're seeing maybe in some cases a little bit less impact here in the early years, but it starts to pick up. And so you're seeing impact across the board with the wave one, the preponderance, just because basic machine learning and some of those predictive types of tools have been in existence for a while, so they're just a bit more mature and we're seeing a bit more impact on them. But the pace is generally picking up as the more generative and unstructured data processing capabilities are coming online. Let's just jump ahead. So we went ahead and we looked at a couple other workflows, security trade fails processing, one that near and dear to Sanjeev and my heart from our previous company. But so we had a fair amount of expertise and knowledge in this one, but we wanted to test our model against it to see if it verified. Um, and also looked at AP invoicing as just another example. Um, you can see the general trends stay the same, but there's some interesting changes in degrees. I mean, if we look at the security trade fails processing, you see even bigger impact, even in the early years on some of the more senior roles, because just a lot of the tasks involved with predicting whether a security trade fail is going to fail is happening at higher, more senior levels, and the technology and the predictive types of technologies are already there. So it's just the nature of that work means that some of those more senior roles in that workflow are getting impacted a little bit earlier than we saw in some of the other spaces. And a little bit to counter that with the AP invoicing, you see a little bit slower to take off. And a lot of this is because the data is still really it's dispersed. A lot of the data is fragmented around accounts payable. And so, as we built the model, it's factoring that in and seeing, that there's still probably some more work that has to do. And a lot of getting AI to work right is about getting the data right. And this is a case where some of that still needs to get gathered and tackled and handled appropriately. But you can start to see sort of the prediction here that it's probably just a few years off before you start seeing some bigger impacts there. Because theoretically, once you have that data, we can look at these types of activities and say, oh, this is what predictive exception processing or UDP types of capabilities in theory can do a lot of I was going to say damage, but can do a lot of the heavy lifting and a lot of the work to drive efficiencies in these spaces. So the exciting part for us, this was really just kind of a test run. We think the exciting aspect of this would be able to scale this up. The actual models that we build need a little bit, they need some hardening to make sure that the programming in using some of the available AI tools does require a fair amount of work, and just driving persistence and things like stats that you can make sure that you're getting the level of accuracy that you want and that it's repeatable, but also that we can pump in. Roughly speaking, we estimate there's about order of magnitude 5,000 workflows in the state of Connecticut. We tackled three. So depending on where the interest, the effort was, whether it was by specific sectors, it could be different regions in the state of Connecticut. It could be sectors. It could be looking at any different types of segmentations you want. You could try to tackle some or all of those 5,000 workflows if we had a bit of a stronger application infrastructure in place that we don't think is that heavy of a lift, but it would require a bit of work to get there. This chart, don't get too scared trying to read the fine print on this one, but this one was a 2x2. Again, thinking about how do we get to actionable and, some insights that could be drawn from the approach that we took. And so you see, we took a stab. We said, well, if we take this displacement risk that we came up with, this sort of scale you see on the lower axis, so from left to right, on the right-hand side being workflows that would be and tasks that would be we believe are more susceptible to AI displacement. But we wanted to think too on this y-axis is like, well, thinking of the types of people who are there now and doing these jobs. What's the skill transition burden was kind of this metric that we came up with, and this notion of, what would it take for a person who's in that job today to transition as the world evolves here. And so, you get these sort of four quadrants. In the bottom right is folks with, look, there's going to be a lot of change, but given the types of people who are in there, you could probably upskill them and try to retain them to do the new way of doing the job, but with the same people. In the lower left, these are resilient roles where relatively less AI impact, therefore not as critical and to try to address. The upper left, we call it sort of stuck but stable. These are areas that, at least right now, for the relatively near or midterm, we don't see as having huge AI impact. But the burden that it would still be difficult when or if that comes, it's going to be difficult to transition these folks. And the upper right is probably those folks where a little bit of a red light flashing and saying, we really need to think about, these folks are going to be very challenged. The nature of the work is going to change so dramatically. They're probably not trained or educated or have the specific talents to do the job in the new way that it's going to get done. So what do you do with those folks? But so this is just a way to think about how we could try to action some of the work that or the outputs from the modeling that we were doing. So I'll stop there. I don't know, Chris, Sanjeev, or if there's any questions on the methodology, we could, I think we wanted to spend a little bit of time kind of going to getting some feedback and some thoughts. We'll give you our ideas and notions of what we think some neat opportunities and next steps might be. But maybe before we jump into that, any questions on the methodology or the way we approach the work? I see a raised hand. Dustin.
Hey there. Yes, so my name's Dustin. I'm the director at the CBA Foundation. So I guess one question is, so when you're doing this workflow analysis, I understand that you are, and maybe I just missed it, but you're looking at the skills or as the tasks as part of a workflow.
Mhm.
that may be substituted by AI? But are you also analyzing some of the ones where AI would be like complementary, right, to those specific workflows and to those tasks? And the reason I ask is
Mhm.
because I think while understanding sort of demand destruction, which you would define, which we would find as a result of a substitution
Mhm.
effect,
Mhm.
would be counteracted by those instances in which it is a complement, right? Like general economic theory would suggest like
Mhm.
complementary goods as they get more
Mhm.
productive, increase demand for those labor that uses that complementary good. And so
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering, like, as you're going through this, like, have you seen any of those like skills or tasks that seem to be complemented by AI that we might then see, you know, a greater demand for that type of work because it's sort of amplifying the efforts of the of that labor?
It's a great question. There's a lot to unpack there. Let me first just kind of lay down clearly what we did do, just so we're all on the sort of the same starting page, which was for any workflow that we analyzed, we subdivided that into subtasks. So, order of magnitude 10 to 20 subtasks within any workflow. And then we assigned what type of worker does the activity associated with this subtask. And then we went and applied and made an assessment of what's going to be the impact of AI on that subtask. So sort of at that level. And that's you sort of saw the cumulative results were examples of what I just showed. Um, I think we did a little bit of work of then trying to say, to enable these changes, there's likely to be some new types of jobs that are going to be needed to develop the AI, to maintain the AI. So that was one flavor that we took a look at. We didn't see that as like anywhere close to replacement rate in terms of the demand of the reduction in demand from the efficiencies that we saw being driven. We didn't see these new roles that will have to be there to some degree, but we didn't see them coming in as anywhere close to the replacement rate of the job demand reduction or the FTE reduction coming in. Um, I I think maybe just one other point I'll throw it over to you, Sanjeev, too, and is there are you can see there's probably some more dynamic factors here in play that I keep talking that there's the example of radiology as this profession where automation came in and now you can, read an X-ray and scan so easily that the initial thinking was, gosh, there's not going to be any demand for radiologists anymore. When in fact we're seeing the opposite. And it's because the playing field for how these services that we've increased the demand. It's become so easy to analyze these scans that it's just completely put it on a different plane in terms of the volume and how doctors and the medical practices are using them. That it's actually so the job changes for a typical radiologist because the quantity that they're having to look at has increased so dramatically, but it has countered the initial thinking, which was, oh gosh, we're not going to need radiologists anymore. But go ahead, Sanju.
No, just I'm wondering if there was another angle to the question. I just want to get that out of the way. So, at the beginning of the year, when people were really excited about agentic AI and implementation, it was almost a one-for-one swap. Can we find roles that we can replace with AI? What's happens, and then for those of you who read, you know, the articles, 95% of agentic AI is a failure, etc. If you peel that back, what's happening is people have realized that the way to get real impact out of AI is to actually go below the role, take each worker, understand the work they do, and break off the work that AI can do. So there's always a human left behind. It's almost a partnership. It's often referred to as a hybrid org now. So, I think the picture we should all have in our mind is capacity reduction, right? Demand reduction, meaning I do a certain amount of work. A lot of my work is actually, by the paralegal work, is very particularly challenged in this regard. is to read through large documents, to make a determination, provide a summary, etc. I think that a lot of that can be done with UDP type applications, but the human still remains to verify the output and to then do the higher level analysis of does it meet the client's requirements. So I think there's always a side by side, if you will. And to Brett's points, there are new roles coming up, and they're coming up fast and furious actually at the moment. It's not clear how long the demand curve on that it will take to come up versus the impact on the downside. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
I see. Ben, did you have a question?
Yeah, just sort of to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Just sort of to piggyback off of Dustin's question, because the way I looked at the last slide in the four quadrants, there was sort of like, how do you mitigate the negative impact of job loss? And I think Dustin was sort of asking, what's the good news? And you might be getting this in the opportunities and next steps.
Mhm.
But I think, a lot of this might be a little alarming for people.
Mhm. Well, we did as Saji said at the beginning from the outset, that was our hypothesis was what we're seeing in the market is a bit alarming, and that was a lot of the impetus for us to try to build out this rubric and build a little discipline that could get to some more actionable activities, assuming that some of the changes are going to be fairly profound. Um, I think that I'll let Chris and Sanjeev chime in. I think to me, if I'm trying to take an optimistic lens, it's that there is a moment now for entities like the state of Connecticut to try to get ahead of this. I don't know if you ever really get ahead of it, but to get on it. But we're trying to raise the alarm because it's the pace is so fast. And our typical institutions, Chris has been educating us a lot just in terms of, how long it changes to change the curriculum at the University of Connecticut. You know, and if we're going to rely on those processes and we're going to wait 2 years to develop new training for undergraduates through that level of institution, it's just 2 years from now, it will have changed and evolved so rapidly that the course will be out of date before it gets launched. And so, what are other approaches that we can take? Maybe it's using, are there more flexible educational institutions that we can use? Maybe we tend to think, I think Sanjeev and I are developing a bit of a bias of that it's how do we help smaller businesses? And we're trying to get our heads around how we've got a lot of experience working at the enterprise level where there's resources but to tackle these things. But how do you get high caliber knowledge down to mid-size, smaller size businesses, where we think a lot of the change is really the activity is going to happen, but how do you get that down? How do you scale that type of help? It's something that we're thinking a lot about. But it's there's going to be a lot of transition that's coming, and so it's not the optimism should be let's not sit around and wait. The answers aren't all known. That's the thing. It's happening so fast. No one anywhere tells you this is the answer. You must just do X, Y, and Z, and everything will be fine. It's just what we do know is you have to get into you have to dive into the pool and start and start being part of it, and learning, because it is happening
Yeah.
so quickly. But Sanjeev, Chris, please chime in. It's a great question.
Yeah. First, I just want to recognize there's some questions,
Are there some more?
starting to stack up. So it's
Okay.
Chris and Heidi and Scott. We want to get to them all. Just to field this one correctly, let's just get it out there. There is cause for concern. I don't know if it's cause for alarm, but it's certainly cause for concern. And for those of you who've had the time to read the paper that the study itself, there's a lot in there. You can look at this as a multidimensional problem. Number one, we're overproducing STEM grads in computer science and data science. The demand's collapsing. Number two, there's already a pileup of people looking for jobs. The average time to get a job for a college undergraduate, depending on the degrees, healthcare is interestingly well protected right now. The average time is now exceeding 12 months and heading to 24 months for new grads, right? There are there's we're on the verge if the economy doesn't if it shows like it's going to weaken any of this flat employment growth with high earnings growth that could easily go into like sort of meh earnings growth and then lots of loss of employment. That is definitely out there. So what do we do to prepare for that? And within that, for people who are dislocated, if that's the unfortunate journey, then what are we doing to train them? Like, how are we going to get them AI ready and be, compete in this new market? But the opportunity side is also if there are new roles, and there will be, where will they show up first? What kind of roles will there be? And can we get ahead of, you know, positioning people and training people for them? This is and the feature about AI that is applied AI, it's not just about please go take a, free degree. I just saw that Harvard's declared their AI certification program to be free, and then Stanford offers one, and MIT offers one, and all the hyperscalers offer one. That's not enough. You have to understand how to use AI in the context of the work you're doing in the profession, the discipline you're in. That demands very partnered training between the industries that are going to, want to take this new talent, and the producers of that talent. And I think there's a role in there clearly for the state of Connecticut as well. So hopefully, Ben, that it was covers ground. I want to quickly cover Chris Rivers. I know you moved the slide. Did you want to cover that, or should we turn over to some of the other questions?
I would say, Sanjeev, let's go ahead and finish up the slideshow and then like clearly move
Yeah,
into the Q&A part. And Brett, if you want, I can cover this part if you want
Yeah,
to.
why don't you go ahead?
All right, I'm just gonna rapid fire this because I really
Yeah.
think see the questions popping up and I really think they're worth getting to. And there's also just to kind of finish out on answering what Ben you just asked before moving back to the slides real fast, we're not starting from zero in the state. That's some of the good news. We have great leaders, many of whom are on this call, who are tackling this issue. We're not starting from stationary. And I really do think there's a window there's no silver bullet in any of this because the educational training to really get people across the entire workforce understanding how to work with AI in the job that they are already really good at to make them a national leader and like to bring more companies here, bring more jobs here in this world where like AI competency is going to be a huge part of the value proposition for employers moving forward. I think we have the raw ingredients we need as a state in order to make significant improvements, but it also means getting a lot of folks on the same page. And I'll say, as someone who's ran for the state legislature, talking to elected officials about um, very, very technical AI stuff isn't always the easiest thing. So we need to do more of it, but we're not starting at zero. With that being said, I do think there's a few things that we need to cover in the slide deck, and then we'll go purely into Q&A. But there's really a few different ways we can leverage the tools that we're in the process of developing. We can expand out and run all of the workflows in our state through these tools to create a really empowering tool so you can go in to any business and particularly the small and medium sized businesses and kind of do a scan for them of like what workflows are like probably most, top of mind for leveraging these new AI capabilities. You can do it at the sector level and try to really do some forecasting about the different major sectors in our state. And we can work with the state, with the governor's office, OWS, the state legislature, and the big higher ed institutions that are responsible for like figuring out how this all fits together. And I really think we as a state should be doing all of this at every level where we want to focus in on leveraging this tool and expanding out. I think there's a good discussion to be had there. But that's a couple different approaches we could kind of take this approach and help inform decisions at all of these levels. And that's what we were saying at the beginning about having a tool that gets you to actionable insights and not just industry-wide headlines. And so let's go to the next slide.
Yeah. Maybe we can close with this and then go to questions, but this is just
Yeah.
really sort of, as I said up front, we've completed sort of what we considered phase one. We feel like we've laid out a rubric and a process and a plan and tested it with a prototype. Um, we think that, but we've also probably pressed this as far as we can with the pro bono resources that we had available to us. Um, so it's a little bit of a pitch here, but we really think just with a little, not a giant, massive lift, but with a little bit of support, we think we could harden these applications that we built and enable us to take these and use these as tools to deploy in support of whichever type of approach that or multiple approaches um, to help in the assessment of what we think the impact would be on various sectors, workflows, geographies, etc. But so this is just kind of listed as we've laid out some very specific work plan for what a phase two of the project could look like.
If I could just pitch in here is to say our hope is that a hardened tool like this can be used not just once but repeatedly at a cadence
And
to
updated.
continue to monitor the progression and to inform the actions. It would be wonderful to have this uh, completed, but also then housed so that it's a go forward tool that can be used as Chris was saying in many ways.
Hmm.
All right. So that's the end of the slides. I would say, oh, maybe that's a good final slide. There's already a bunch of great stuff happening in the state of
Oh,
Connecticut.
sorry. Do you want me to put that back up, Chris? I was closing it
No,
out.
that's all right. We
Okay.
can, the deck will probably be accompanied with when we send this out, and we can also attach the report for anyone who's on the call and interested. But Brett and Sanjeev, do we want to rapid fire through the comments or open up the floor to more questions?
I feel like some of the questions have been out there, so let me see if we can quickly tackle them. Chris Cunard, about
Let
the
me take that
community.
one.
Say again,
Let me take this one.
please. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Chris, great question. We will, CT State is definitely looking at career pathways and how to expand them out, and we will be helping with the sort of how risky is AI factor part of this, based in part of this research, based in part of our professional experience. But broadly within CSU, there's also efforts like and David may want to chime in here, of the Connecticut AI, I forgot what it was called.
Academy. Yeah.
Academy, thank you. And so there's leaders across CSU who are definitely looking at AI impacting the sort of future of work and how to train people on it. So all that to say, one of the efforts in not just our community colleges, but CSU broadly, is how to share those lessons learned across the board a lot more. But David, anything else to add on the CTAI Academy?
Part of what
Yeah.
I'm at,
Sorry.
sorry,
Good.
my
Good.
question is the rank and file, the people we're looking to serve who
Yeah.
may know nothing about AI. Someone may show up and say, I want to be a computer programmer. That's my passion. And is there something that's going to get set up to inform and warn those that are entering the system about the risks they face?
All right, fair follow on. The short answer is we could do that, and we've actually had some conversations with Europe, with the efforts they're doing. Is there anything kind of in the uh, pathway of work on the roadmap right now? Nothing concrete yet, but I think it'd be a great idea.
Yeah, we should get the word out. We got to stop overproducing that. So
Yeah.
the next one is, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. No, and Chris, I know you have I could just briefly just chime in for 2 minutes. Yeah. So just an update on the Connecticut Online AI Academy. We actually launched it in January of 2025. It's free for all residents of Connecticut of AI literacy. We use the Google AI Essentials and some other stuff um, as the textbook and software. We already had over 2,000 residents of the state go through that program in just under a year. We had 1,700 requests in the first 2 weeks. But luckily, with Senator Maroney's help and some others, we were able to get some money into the budget for the next 2 years for us to do an AI Academy expansion. And that topic that you talked about in particular, in fact, my 2 o'clock call is with actually one of our philanthropic donors who actually is helping us even further with expansion on this one. But it's AI for business in particular is going to be for small and medium-sized businesses and not-for-profits, because the not-profit community as well and we're going to have a beginner level training and then an advanced level training. And then we'll also have AI for K through 12, one for teachers, and then one for administrators and Board of Education members in a Teens AI Academy. We're actually off in production right now, and we'll be able to launch that around May or June of this year. But this will also be free for all residents of Connecticut. And to your point, it's not just like oh, put it out there and hope and pray, like what Harvard and Stanford does. This is going to be instructor led because our AI Academy first year that we did this, we found just like with anything, if you leave it to be entirely self-paced, your completion rate is about 7 to 10%. Whereas if you have it instructor led, the completion rate is around 80%, and we're actually getting around an 80% completion of those there. So it's mixing the industry recognized curriculum with instructor led that produces completion. So more things coming over in the coming months, but and I know Grace put in stuff about like tech talent and things like that, but at least from Charter Oak and the AI Academy expansion, this goes in perfect alignment with what we're doing and expanding, and we're getting thousands upon thousands of people to do it. But as you saw, it is 1.1 million people. So Charter Oak is only one component of this as well.
We'd love to take some of this offline, David, like being able to layer on business context for where are the vulnerabilities, which workflows have vulnerabilities might be an interesting angle there. Okay, so we've got Heidi factoring in robotics. So that's maybe I can tackle that really quickly. So the answer is yes, partially, and let me tell you why I'm qualifying that. We wanted to keep this pure AI and not merge it with the robotics impact because that is over. There's a larger impact when the two combine. And so you should look at anything we're saying right now as an underestimate. We felt that was a safer spot than to reach into, robotics as well. Robotics have inherently had AI in them, but they're actually getting more powerful and more capable and more prolific as a result. So some of the flows that we looked at, actually none of the flows we looked at actually had robotics, but we did factor that into the algorithm. So if you had digitization impacts or robotics impacts, you could look at those in combination if needed. So hopefully, Heidi, that answers your question. Scott, it's the speed and implementation of change, the cost of implementing new workflows is so this is really interesting. This is a lot of the work I'm personally involved in right now, and it is rather shocking the velocity with which it's implementing. That's kind of the feature that, and I'm a skeptic. I've been there, done that. I've heard too much about, yeah, in 6 months the world will be a better place. But it genuinely people are actually laying down guardrails that says any implementation should be 3 to 6 months maximum, must drive an IRR of X. It's the ease with which you can do this. I will flip it over and say, on the other hand, the ease with which you can control this is another matter, right? Risk and control is starting to be the governor of how fast things are going, not investment dollars and not, the implementation timeline. So it's very different than the web in that way, right? Right now, I'm in more conversations about how do we what does this do to our control environment if you've got all these various bots from multiple vendors running around? That's becoming the hurdle, if you will. Does that answer your question, Scott?
It does. It does. Thank you. And I just know that anytime you touch workflows, you open up a can of worms inside of organizations and
Yes.
long change cycles and things like that. And I too have been surprised with the amount of experimentation in the space. I also, in the back of my mind too, I'm thinking that a lot of this work now is being subsidized effectively. The cost of this is being subsidized by a lot of the providers. So when the true costs come out, will that
Well,
have an
I
impact?
would,
But I don't disagree with the
yeah.
outcome. I don't disagree with the outcome. This is purely about rate of adoption, rate of acceptance, rate of impact.
So I would say yes. It's good to be realistic about how fast, but you're going to hear, I think, by the end of the year of very large and orders of magnitude ROI. It's not hype. We've been hands-on involved in a couple of these. So, okay. Bernie, I think FTE demand reduction estimates primarily impacting larger businesses in CT, or does it include mid-size and smaller? So, Brett, you can say more about this. This is
Mhm.
actually makes a case for we want to complete the model and do it
Yeah.
systematically for everything in Connecticut and beyond, because you can in this is a GPT, so the transformer can be used very, very quickly. Right now, it's been done on, what is it, 5 workflows?
Yeah.
Brett. So we
Roughly.
did it just across 5 workflows, and they were
But we
all
didn't,
larger businesses.
yeah, we didn't specifically go into a segmentation of large or small. It's one that you took the words out of my mouth, Sanju, that we would love to be able to build this out and add that segmentation into it.
We'd love to try this across a greater diversity, and that's the help we're looking for. Grace, thank you for that related solution. Look forward to digging into that actually. Christine, two high school cheers. What should they think about majoring? Yeah, we can. It's actually I shouldn't laugh. It is a very serious
Yeah.
question. So
Yeah.
no, I'll give you off the cuff and welcome Chris and Brett. Number one, really be careful about going into programming or you can go into computer science engineering, but CS purely is a really dangerous zone right now. Data science, oddly, is headed that way. It's but there's a story to be told about how the outsourcing firms, who took a 30+% hit on their demand for pure coding, quickly replaced it with data science. And so there's a big sucking sound of those jobs as well. So, they're both good. You need to know computers work and computer science works and programming works and data science works, but those roles are starting to diminish. On the other hand, the demand is going up for critical thinkers. So this may be the revenge of the liberal arts,
Hmm.
right? And I have an English, along with my computer science background, I have an English degree or English major too, and Brett's a history major. So, we take some relish in that fact. But there's increasing hiring of people who can manage AI and oversee AI, not and not do the work that AI can do. And so, my own guidance to my family has been, if you can get a combination degree, if you can get whatever you do, get an AI somewhere in your background, because if you don't, that's a problem. Get something that's going to drive critical thinking. One of the high demand degrees for for investment bankers, surprisingly, is philosophy now. It
Hmm.
used to be that a long time ago, and now it's philosophy again because it just teaches you how to think and communicate. Communications. Degrees are becoming more in demand. So, and pure engineering, by the way, chemical engineering and mechanical, those are all fine,
Yeah.
right? So it's hopefully that was useful.
I would say, yeah, I would just add on. I think it's that combination. I've got a couple of nieces and nephews that are all pre-med right now, and I keep trying to tell them it's not just organic chemistry. That's great. Do your pure science, but pair it with art history, French literature, philosophy, English. Develop those critical thinking skills because the you're going to have access. You're not going to have to memorize organic chemistry anymore as a physician. That's all going to be at your fingertips. It's how you deploy it. How do you ask the right questions? How do you interpret the questions that come back is going to be very critical. So I think there is a little bit of that revenge of the liberal arts coming, which isn't to say I think engineering paired with liberal arts, I think is a really strong combination, but that's just me.
I am a product of a STEM background with a physics undergrad with a nuclear engineering focus, and then made a transition into public policy and international relations, which made me a pretty awesome consultant to drop in the middle of like not people not knowing what to do and just figuring it out on the fly. I really think for people asking the question what to study moving forward, it's the other question to ask is how to study it. And the reason why I say that is the MIT study came out of a couple months back where some students just use AI to write a paper and their knowledge retention rates for doing it that way pretty abysmal. The students who worked on their own brain, wrote a paper and used AI to help edit it and make it another level, much better. Students who did all human, but much better retention. So part of the problem that I think students are going to face moving forward is the AI cheat code is at all their fingertips. And yet the problem is learning comes from being uncomfortable, getting things wrong, and like really struggling with it. And if we take that out of the learning process, I don't know how effective the learning process is going to be anymore. So, in addition to what Brett and Sanjeev said, which I agree with in terms of what to study, I also think it's a question about being disciplined and how to study. And I would really focus on the things that make us inherently human, focus on creating, focus on getting things wrong, not just using AI to give you the cheat code.
Mhm.
And by the way, math majors will do extremely well regardless. So physics is perfectly fine too. Um, there's a question here the from Chris again. As Connecticut's community colleges consider career pathways, is there an AI risk factor score that can be assigned for each path? That's a great idea. And Chris, that is in fact the value of this tool we've developed is that it can be used in a multitude of ways. It can certainly project in the way they're projecting right now the workforce impact. But we've had a couple of inquiries that says, could you go inside a firm and just use it to project where the AI opportunities are? And the answer is yes. By virtue of that, if you want to, evaluate what, sectors or businesses may have more risk than not, to create a risk score, absolutely.
All right, we are right at 1:30. So I would say out of respect to everyone's time, I think I speak on behalf of Sanjeev and Brett and myself. We are happy to have conversations offline outside of this larger recording. We will be eager to have conversations. We're eager to see where this can go. And switching my hat for a second on behalf of social impact partners, Sanjeev and Brett, I just want everyone to know all of this work that you heard of today, perfectly pro bono. This is partners just rolling up their sleeves and trying to figure out what's in the best interest of the state of Connecticut. So with that, I just want to say thank you. And Mark, I saw you came on camera. Any final closing thoughts?
No, I agree with what you've said, Chris. I mean, I think this is something that the state, from a kind of policy and planning standpoint, needs to really embrace. And hopefully some of our partners in business associations, CBIA, et cetera, Advanced CT, will be interested in going deeper on this. Obviously, the Office of Workforce Strategy.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone.